Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 2 of the series. Chapter 21. He Jing walked towards the door. She had roughly guessed why they were here. Mother he pulled Father he to the side and said nervously in a low voice, I'm afraid they're here to urge Jingjing to repay the money. I wonder how much Jingjing borrowed and how much money we left on our cards. Father he was very serious, just 1,000 yuan. This month's expenses have already exceeded the limit. They both felt overwhelmed with worry. He Sui went to the kitchen to pour some water, but he didn't have any intention to bring it to them. He knew that this group of rich second-generation heirs wouldn't drink their boiled water, so he simply went to Mother He's side and listened to them calculate how much money they could save. He couldn't help but sneer. You want me to apologize for this? They've come to collect the debt in person. It's really embarrassing. He Xiaogua didn't dare to speak. He timidly hid behind the sofa and stuck his head out. Suddenly, when the group of rich-looking boys and girls at the door saw He Jing, it was as if they had seen their savior. Their eyes lit up, and they shouted with exaggerated expressions, Sister Jing, we finally found you. The solution to the problem in the notes you sold us was too difficult. We couldn't understand it at all. Can you explain it to us as after sales? Father he, Mother he Sui, and he Xiaogua were all shocked when they heard what they said. He Jing was not surprised at all. She said without a frown, sure, but it's already very late. Sister Jing, there are only 48 hours left until Monday. Just treat it as a matter of life and death for us. We will definitely listen carefully and won't take up too much of your time. He Jing thought for a moment and turned to the dumbfounded Father he and Mother he as she said, Dad, Mom, I'm going out for a while. I'll be back around midnight. The struggling students were moved to tears and quickly said, Uncle, Auntie, don't worry. We promise to send her back safely. Before Father he and Mother he could come back to their senses, the door slammed and He Jing had already closed the door and left. The living room fell into silence. Only the sound of the door closing could be heard. After a long silence, Mother he seemed to be in a trance and asked carefully, Hubby, did you hear that? Father he's mood was extremely complicated. Yes, I heard. It turned out that He Jing really did not take money from the Qing family. The money for the Odin was earned by herself. Then, the doubts they had about her just now were too hurtful. He Sui was extremely depressed, and his hand holding the water was a little unstable. Who would have thought that He Jing had such a way to make money? Nothing like this had ever happened in their school. He Xiaogua felt that the fishball he had eaten was totally worth it. He smiled and said, Fourth brother, you should apologize to sister properly later. He Sui glared at him, but he had no choice but to respond, got it. The door of the other room suddenly opened, and He Ning walked out wearing white earphones. His beautiful eyes were indifferent. I'm going out for a while. Mother he asked, where are you going so late at night? He Ning walked out of the door without looking back. The door closed with a bang once again. He Jing got into the car of one of the struggling students. It was a limited edition Ferrari. The flashy red Ferrari was extremely cool. He Jing remembered that the struggling student A was not even 18 years old yet. Her beautiful eyebrows furrowed. The other two girls who were assigned to sit with her did not notice her emotions. They even told He Jing the reason, this is his cousin's car. He lent it to him temporarily. The driver's license is also in the car. He Jing said, I'll drive. Her tone left no room for doubt. Struggling student A wanted to show off in front of He Jing but was instead pushed to the passenger seat by her. He felt aggrieved, but he didn't dare to say anything, afraid that He Jing might leave if she got unhappy. However, when He Jing adjusted her posture, it was obvious that she was an experienced driver. Her side profile was extraordinarily beautiful under the cold moonlight. Struggling student A couldn't help but say, Sister Jing, how long have you been learning to drive? Chapter 22. She was too skilled. The two girls were equally impressed. He Jing looked ahead and replied casually, it's been a while. I used to dream of being a racer. What about now? I want to be a Nobel Prize winner. The two girls were speechless. Struggling student A, what prompted such a great leap in your aspirations? He Jing said lightly, women are not allowed to participate in F1. Struggling student A was speechless. He thought to himself, the fact was too real. On the way to the private library, the conversation in the Ferrari rarely stopped. Apart from the initial response, He Jing barely said anything throughout the journey. The two girls chattered endlessly, from popular celebrities to the school forum, and from the school forum to Yanhanshi. They even brought He Jing into the discussion. Sister Jing, how are things going between you and Yanhanshi? If it doesn't work, let's change to someone else. I have a senior in my social circle who is very handsome. If you're interested, I'll send you his WeChat. He Jing waited for a red light and said indifferently, I'm not interested in Yanhanshi anymore. I won't pursue him anymore. Struggling student A's eyes lit up. He felt that his chance had come. Sister Jing, look at me. I'm not a scumbag. I can be your boyfriend. He Jing replied, ugly rejection. Struggling student A said. There was no more love. The two girls thought that He Jing was injured from chasing Yanhanshi, so they comforted her and cursed the guy. He Jing laughed and said, I don't want to be in a relationship for the time being. I just want to focus on studying. The girl who failed to sell her senior was greatly disappointed and could only give up on the idea. In the blink of an eye, they had arrived at the library. Struggling student A's private library was also open to the public except for Saturday and Sunday. The normal libraries were closed at this time, so they could only come here. He Jing explained the questions to them until 11 o'clock. Only then did the group of struggling students finally feel that they had an epiphany. With He Jing's godlike thinking and learning ability, they could not think of anything else other than wow. After it was over, struggling student A volunteered, Sister Jing, I'll send you back. Other classmates chimed in and teased struggling student A until he blushed. However, He Jing remained calm and said, no need. This place is close to home. I'll walk back. It's getting late, you all should head back and rest early. Struggling student A, who had been rejected twice, felt disheartened. He insisted on sending He Jing out of the library. The two of them walked out of the revolving door together. Under the dim yellow streetlights, a slender figure stood alone and cast a dark shadow on the ground. He Jing was taken aback. Then, her red lips curled up. She turned to look at struggling student A and said, there's no need to send me off. Go get the car. Struggling student A was dumbfounded. Before he could ask why, he saw He Jing walk towards the person under the streetlight like a cheerful butterfly and shout, second brother. He Ning lowered his eyes and said indifferently, Dad and Mom were worried and asked me to pick you up. I know. He Jing held his arm intimately. Let's go. Dad and Mom must be waiting anxiously. He Ning frowned, but he did not break free in the end. He glanced at He Jing, and her angelic face under the moonlight appeared pure and innocent. Her bright smile seemed capable of sweetening anyone's heart. His heart suddenly felt like a small pebble had been thrown into a calm lake, creating ripples. He Jing didn't notice anything and asked with a sweet smile, are Dad and Mom asleep? They're asleep. Thank you for picking me, second brother. It's nothing. The two of them walked back on foot. Their connected shadows looked like conjoined twins. He Ning caught a whiff of the girl's fragrance. It was like a sweet orange with a faint milky fragrance. He was silent for a moment before he suddenly said, I'm sorry. Chapter 23. He Jing stopped in her tracks and looked at him strangely. Why are you apologizing to me? He Ning also stopped and looked straight at her with his beautiful eyes. His eyes were filled with seriousness. If I hadn't asked, fourth brother wouldn't have said those words. I apologize for my and fourth brother's actions. He Jing pursed her red lips tightly and remained silent for a while. She observed He Ning's reaction and saw the feigned calmness on his face concealing his unease. Unable to hold back, she burst into laughter, ha ha. Second brother is so serious. I thought it was something major, but it turns out to be this. Don't worry, I didn't take it to heart. He Ning still didn't believe his ears, really. Of course. When He Sui wrongly accused her, she deliberately did not explain, just to wait for them to find out. People only believed what they saw, not what others said. She had just joined this family, and the slightest movement would cause them to be vigilant and panic. It was normal for them to suspect her. She wasn't angry at all, but her excessively good-natured leniency would only make people think they could take advantage of her. To prevent them from doing more outrageous things in the future, she could only pretend to be angry. She didn't expect the effect to be better than she had imagined. He Ning, who was only gentle to Cheng Yi in the original novel, had already opened a hole in his heart. He Jing didn't believe that she couldn't pierce through it. Sure enough, He Ning's complexion visibly improved. He looked at her, his handsome face still had a cold look, but his tone had unconsciously softened a lot. But don't do such things in the future. You should behave like a student at school. You're not a businessman. He Jing nodded and smiled with narrowed eyes. I understand. He Ning didn't say anything else, and the two of them went home together. He Jing thought that when she returned home, the house would definitely be pitch black. However, that wasn't the case. The clock passed 20 minutes, and the He family's house was brightly lit. Other than He Xiaogua, Father He and Mother He, as well as He Sui, were sitting in a row on the sofa in the living room. None of them were asleep. As they saw their return, the three of them stood up from the sofa almost in unison and said one after another, "You guys are back." He Jing greeted them one by one, "Dad, Mom, fourth brother, why aren't you asleep yet?" Mother He pushed He Sui with an unnatural expression, causing him to stagger and fall in front of He Jing. He Sui's arrogant face was filled with reluctance. He lowered his head and quickly said, "I'm sorry." If one didn't listen carefully, one wouldn't be able to hear it clearly. He Jing teased him intentionally and deliberately smiled mischievously. "Fourth brother, what did you say? I didn't hear you clearly." He Sui immediately raised his head and glared at her fiercely. Then, he gritted his teeth and shouted, "I said I'm sorry." He Ning frowned. He Jing smiled gently. "It's okay, fourth brother, don't take it to heart." Only then did Mother He say, "Jingjing, this matter is Xiaosui's fault. Don't take it to heart. Xiaosui promised me that it will never happen again." He Jing smiled lightly when she heard that. Her eyes were like crescents. "I believe what fourth brother said. The Odin is still in my room. They can be reheated and eaten tomorrow morning." He Sui saw that He Jing wasn't being unreasonable and unforgiving, so he forced himself to calm down. He turned to He Ning and asked straightforwardly, "Second brother, did you go out specifically to pick her up?" He Ning pursed his thin lips and his expression immediately became very unpleasant. He Jing made a sound of surprise and looked at him with confusion. Their eyes met. Before He Jing could say anything, He Ning strode back to his room and slammed the door coldly. Mother He was afraid that He Jing had been bullied and asked worriedly, "Jingjing, did anything happen between you and Xiao Ning? Did you happen to run into each other on the way back?" Chapter 24. He Jing smiled and said, "No, I get along very well with second brother. I like second brother very much." Mother He finally eased her worried and sighed slightly. "Among all the children, Xiao Ning is the most introverted. We can't change no matter what. Previously, when Xiao Yi was around, he would often talk to her, so the situation was slightly better. If you like him, please trouble him more. I really hope he can be more cheerful." He Jing nodded slightly and looked at the tightly shut door behind her. Her eyes were bright and full of meaning. The two of them talked for a while before He Jing returned to her room because Mother He needed to sleep as she had work the next day. Mother He and Father He cooperated to turn the sofa into a bed. He Sui sneaked into He Jing's room when the two of them were not paying attention. He saw He Jing sitting in front of the dressing table and was about to open the drawer to look for a comb. When she heard the movement, she looked up slightly and asked him, "Fourth brother, what's the matter?" He Sui leaned against the door and held the doorknob with one hand. He asked curiously, "What happened between you and second brother? Why did he come back with you?" He Jing tilted her head when she heard that. She stretched out a finger and placed it on her red lips. She blinked and said playfully, "It's a secret." He Sui immediately pulled a long face and cursed. He glared at her and warned her fiercely, "Let me tell you, don't even think about getting close to second brother. He will never care about you. Our hearts belong to Xiao Yi." He Jing said inwardly, "Oh." He Jing's expression did not change as she smiled slightly. "It's so late. Aren't you tired, fourth brother?" He Sui was speechless. He Sui thought, all right, I've said my piece. Let's go. As he left, He Jing did not forget to remind him, please close the door. Thank you, fourth brother. He Sui had originally wanted to slam the door and leave dramatically, but when he heard her words, he was so angry that he was fuming. He turned around and looked at Father He and Mother He, who were already lying on the sofa bed. In the end, he did not dare to slam the door. He could only close the door softly, grind their teeth, and raise his middle fingers. He Jing took off the hair clip in front of the dressing table and went to bed. She obviously couldn't take a shower tonight. After all, she had to pass through the living room to go to the bathroom. By the time she finished washing up, it would be midnight. It would be so noisy that the two adults couldn't sleep. They woke up earlier than the chicken and slept later than the cow every day. It could be said that it was very tiring. He Jing turned off the lights and lay on the bed. She closed her eyes and couldn't fall asleep. Unable to resist, she sighed and got up from the bed in the dark. She used the moonlight to get the cold Odin on the desk. Just as she was about to eat, there was a soft knock on the door. He Jing looked at the door in confusion. She walked over hesitantly and opened the door. In the dimly lit doorway stood a figure darker than the darkness itself, and she couldn't even see his face clearly. Then, a plastic bag containing something was thrust toward her. The person at the door turned around and left. He Jing called out in a low voice, "Second brother." There was no response. She had no choice but return to her room. She closed the door and turned on the light. There was a piece of pineapple bread in the plastic bag. The bread was crumpled, and 2 pieces of crispy pineapple crust had fallen off. It was unknown where they had come from, but they were very soft. He Jing's eyes curved into a smile. She put down the cold Odin and ate the sweet pineapple bread. Early the next morning, He Jing felt refreshed. When she went out of her room, she saw He Sui sitting on the sofa and playing with He Xiaogua. He Ning was preparing breakfast in the kitchen. The He family's breakfast was made by a few brothers in turn, except for He Xiaogua, who was not even as tall as the kitchen counter. He couldn't even reach the pot on his tiptoes. He Jing brushed her teeth and washed her face. She immediately went into the kitchen and smiled brightly, "Second brother, let me help you." Chapter 25. He Ning was frying eggs. When he saw her approaching, his gaze hardened and he ordered coldly, "Stand further away." He Jing had just stopped when the oil in the pot splashed out. It didn't burn anything, but there was an obvious spot of oil on her school uniform. He Ning frowned and called out, "Fourth brother." He Sui also came into the kitchen. He still had a triangular plastic board in his hand that he hadn't put down in time. He asked, "Second brother, what's wrong?" He Ning pursed his thin lips and ordered, "Take her out." When He Sui saw He Jing, he sneered and said mockingly, "I told you earlier that second brother wouldn't pay attention to you, but you still went up to him." Just as he finished speaking, He Ning said, "Change out of your school uniform and let fourth brother wash it for you." He Sui, who was pleased with himself, was speechless. He had a face full of questions instantly. He Jing glanced at He Sui and saw his expression as if he had eaten sh*t. She smiled. "Okay, thank you, second brother." He Sui called out, "Second brother," in dissatisfaction. He wanted to protest, but when he saw He Ning raise his eyebrows, he immediately wilted and became extremely depressed. So be it. If you go to Yin High School wearing dirty clothes, you'll be embarrassing our He family. He Jing was amused and raised her eyebrows. She did not expect He Sui to be so afraid of He Ning. Sometimes, he would even speak harshly to Mother He. He Ning could subdue him with a single glance. As expected of the second male lead. He Sui met her teasing gaze and immediately glared at her, saying fiercely, "What are you looking at? Hurry up and take it off." He Jing was just teasing him. She didn't really want to embarrass him, so she laughed, "Fourth brother, there's no need. The school is about to issue a new uniform. It's just a small spot of oil that you can't notice if you don't look carefully." He Sui immediately beamed with joy and revealed an, "At least you know what," expression. He turned to He Ning and muttered, "Second brother, you heard her. It's not that I didn't want to wash for her." He Ning replied with an He Sui quickly ran out of the kitchen, afraid that there would be more trouble. He Jing found an apron from somewhere and put it on. The big apron wrapped around her slender body. Even if it was an ordinary apron, she looked very good when she put it on. Second brother, let me help you. This way, I won't dirty my clothes. He Ning pursed his thin lips slightly and did not object. However, when He Jing walked to his side, he said, I've paid you back for what I owed you yesterday. He Jing was stunned and felt a little helpless. It turned out that he showed her kindness because he felt that he owed her something. Yesterday, because of his words, she was ridiculed and bullied by He Sui, so he specially made her reclaim it back from He Sui today. This was really. He Jing didn't know what to say. However, He Jing did not give up and smiled at him. Thank you, second brother, for specially giving me pineapple bread last night. It was delicious. He Ning's beautiful eyebrows knitted immediately, and his voice was clear and slightly cold. What pineapple bread? He Jing was stunned. She was even more surprised than him. If he didn't give her the pineapple bread, then who did? Suddenly, a ridiculous thought surfaced in her mind. She turned around and looked at He Sui, who was playing with He Xiaogua on the sofa. She thought, could it be him? The corners of He Jing's mouth twitched slightly, and then she fell silent. After a moment, she raised her face and easily avoided the topic. It's nothing. Maybe someone accidentally stuffed it into my place. Second brother, what do you want me to do? I'll help you. He Ning was not a person who loved gossip. He frowned and did not ask further. He turned off the fire and scooped the eggs from the pot and said, done. Chapter 26. As she buried her doubts in her heart, He Jing's perception of He Sui changed. She remembered that the original novel didn't portray He Sui as a tsundere. This intermittent and piercing gaze made He Sui inexplicably feel goosebumps. He could not help but wonder if someone was cursing him behind his back. When he finally caught the source of that gaze from He Jing, he rebuked bluntly, what are you looking at? What's there to see? He Jing straightforwardly asked, fourth brother, did you give me the pineapple bread last night? He Sui's expression changed drastically at a speed visible to the naked eye. His ears turned red all of a sudden, and he became completely flustered. It was as if his mind had gone blank for a moment, and he did not know how to answer. Then, he raised his voice and adopted an extremely ferocious attitude, Bullsh *T, I won't give you bread. At the end of his sentence, he stuttered. He Jing's mood was strange. He Xiaogua was eating fried eggs. He held a spoon in one hand and asked curiously, what pineapple bread? He Sui's redness extended from his ears to his face. He quickly kicked He Ning's foot under the table and hinted crazily, I'm not sure. It must be second brother who gave it to me. He Ning coolly rejected, I didn't. He Sui was anxious. He gritted his teeth and said, then it must have been mom who gave it to you. Anyway, it's not me. It definitely can't be me. He Jing drawled, oh, and smiled faintly. I don't think it's fourth brother either. Maybe mom gave it to me. I'll ask her later. As soon as she finished speaking, He Sui stood up with a whoosh and roared, it's just a loaf of bread. Is it necessary to ask so many questions? You're so petty. I wonder how the Qing family treated you. Seeing that he was about to get angry, He Jing promptly changed the subject and said calmly, mainly because the bread is too delicious. I liked it a lot, so I wanted to ask where it was bought and thank the person. At the same time, He Sui was speechless as he suddenly lost his temper and his face turned red. He slowly sat down again and squeezed out a sentence after a long time, you're so greedy. It's just a piece of bread. You're so ignorant. He Jing got up and went back to her room. She took out the leftover oden and placed it on the dining table. It's still good when it's hot. Second brother and I came back late, so I'll have to trouble fourth brother to give this to the person who gave me the bread. He Sui snorted and turned his head. I don't want it. You trouble someone else. He Jing clasped her hands together and said coquettishly, fourth brother, please. This is you begging me. Yes, yes. He Xiaogua bit on the egg. He couldn't understand why He Jing had to ask He Sui, who had been at loggerheads with her, when He Sui and He Ning were in the same high school and returned home late. He thought, sigh, my brothers and sisters are too strange. It's a headache. Een High School didn't have a day off on Saturday. It only had a day off on Sunday, so He Jing still had to go to school today. He Xiaoguo was still picked up by her third brother, whom she had never met before. Before she left, He Jing asked, when our third brother, fifth brother, and sixth brother coming back from Aunt's house. He Sui stretched his neck to look at the bus on the road and replied, Aunt's family owns a snack bar. Recently, a new residential building has opened near them. The flow of people is huge, and they need help. Third brother, fifth brother, and sixth brother won't be back until next week at least. He Jing didn't know much about the situation of the He family's relatives. After all, there were many and complicated characters in the novel. Some unimportant characters would be written in a few sentences or a chapter or two. Moreover, readers were more focused on the emotional and sweet romantic parts rather than paying special attention to those characters. Chapter 27. Hence, He Jing went to school. Een High School was particularly unusual today. He Jing walked on the road to school and found that there were discussions everywhere. Her intuition told her that these discussions were related to Yan Hanshi. Sure enough, someone with very accurate information spread the news about Yan Hanshi's detention and fight on the school forum. The entire school was instantly in an uproar, like boiling water. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yan Hanshi was taken into custody. The students from First High School actually had the audacity to report the young master of a city. Don't they want to live in a city anymore? There were even some senior students eager to confront students from First High School and fight for justice for Yan Hanshi. The students from First High School can't win the fight, so they play tricks. What kind of true heroes were they? He Jing was a little speechless. Ordinary people would usually be detained for a few days for fighting, but Yan Hanshi had actually come out so quickly. As expected of the male lead. Suddenly, a quarrel broke out. A girl with a wavy ponytail, accompanied by two other girls, cornering a boy against a tree. The girl wore white knee-high stockings, and her long and fair legs caught everyone's attention. She lifted one leg and pressed it thump next to the boy's ears, scaring all the boys present. The boy, embarrassed and afraid to look at her skirt, hid his head like a quail. The girl asked aggressively, "Repeat what you said just now." The boy quickly begged for mercy with a mournful face, "Sister Chiuyu, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said bad things about Brother Shi. Please spare me this time. I told you to repeat what you just said." Reluctantly, the boy spoke in a barely audible voice, "So what if he has good grades? What does it matter if he's handsome? He still ended up getting detained. He's always skipping classes and causing trouble. Yan Hanshi is nothing special. I don't understand why the girls in school like him so much, so superficial." As soon as he finished, all the girls present became furious, and each one wanted to rush forward and hit him. Yan Hanshi was the idol of all the girls in the school, and the idol could not be slandered. How dare he secretly badmouth Yan Hanshi? He even said that they were superficial. Unforgivable. The girl raised her chin, her eyes filled with contempt as she said, "How dare you belittle Brother Shi? Look at yourself in the mirror. Brother Shi can get first place without class. Can you?" The boy's face turned red and he wished he could dig a hole in the ground. "I'm sorry. Get lost." The girl put down her leg and kicked his butt. "If you dare to say bad things about Brother Shi again, don't blame me for being rude to you." The boy didn't dare to look back after being kicked. He covered his butt and ran away without looking back. The farce ended after 5 minutes. The boys who were watching and recording the video felt unsatisfied, but they could only gradually disperse. He Jing also planned to leave. She turned her head and looked away. However, from the corner of her eye, the girl who had just thumped the boy walked towards her with a group of people. She blocked her way and cast a shadow over her. "Stop right there. What's the matter?" He Jing did not even lift her eyelids and asked indifferently. Of course, she recognized the girl in front of her. Shen Qiuyu, the daughter of the wealthy Shen family and the publicly acknowledged female overlord in Een High School. Unlike the fake heiress who was arrogant and disdained associating with others, Shen Qiuyu had a group of followers and was known as the Yan Hanshi's fan club. Those who were willing to join the organization and those who were unwilling to join the organization had to join the organization as long as they were named by her. Many boys who did not like Yan Hanshi at all were forced to join the organization. Whenever Yan Hanshi had any activities, they had to form a group and go to the venue to cheer him on. This rich young lady was also quite generous. She had paid her membership fees well, so she had not caused any trouble. After a long time, some people were moved by her infatuation and called Yan Hanshi the school bully and the overlord flower. If they were really together, they would be called the overlord couple. The fake heiress liked Yan Hanshi, so she was naturally disgusted by the overlord couple. Therefore, she and Shinchilyu were at loggerheads with each other. The two of them became enemies. It was obvious that Shinchilyu was looking for trouble. Chapter 28. As expected, Shinchilyu took another step forward and threatened coldly, "It's rare for Brother Shi to come to school today. You'd better not harass him. If I find out that you're pestering him, you won't have an easy time." Jing was speechless. She took a step back and said calmly, "I had no intention to pester him. Let me go over." Shinchilyu raised her eyebrows and she became even angrier. "Don't think that just because you have an engagement with Brother Shi, you can look down on everyone. I won't let you go over today." Jing looked at her subtly as if she was looking at a new species that had invaded from some unknown planet. Then, she crossed her arms and asked slowly, "Class is about to start. Are you leaving me here to skip class with me?" Shinchilyu choked and felt the rage burning inside her chest. For a moment, she could not think of what to do with her. As it was well known, Yan Hanshi detested campus bullying. In the past, he had caught someone bullying a transfer student, and he had broken his leg on the spot. Then, the school expelled the bully. Since then, there had not been a single violent incident at In High School. It had even won the title of Top 10 High School. Therefore, locking Jing in the toilet and stripping her clothes were definitely not allowed. Even pulling each other's hair was prohibited. Seeing that it was almost time for class, Jing did not want to waste time with Shinchilyu. She reluctantly took a step back and promised her, "I promise you that I will never pester Yan Hanshi again, and I will break off the engagement with him. If you don't step aside, I will go to the dean." Shinchilyu was stunned. She could hardly believe her ears. Jing walked around her and was about to go over. Shinchilyu grabbed her arm and raised her voice, "What is it? Say it again." Her tone was as if the sun had risen from the west and Mars was about to collide with Earth. Jing frowned and said impatiently, "I said, I won't bother Yan Hanshi anymore. You don't have to treat me as an enemy anymore." Shinchilyu screamed, "Why?" Jing looked amused. "Is there a need to ask? I don't like him anymore. I don't feel any feelings for him. I don't want to pursue him anymore." Liar. Jing used to like Yan Hanshi to the point of being sick. As long as Yan Hanshi appeared, she would stick to him like a piece of sticky candy. He couldn't get rid of her, and now she said she didn't have any feelings for him anymore. It was really going to rain red. Jing was really powerless to explain. She said casually, "Believe it or not, if you keep dragging me, I'll be late for class." Shinchilyu furrowed her brows and held her tighter, as if afraid that she would run away, and said, "No, you have to give me a reason today. If you don't give me a reasonable reason, I won't believe you and won't let you go to class." What a strange person. Helpless, Jing said coldly, "Because he has a criminal record." Shinchilyu's eyes widened. What a lame reason. She felt like she had been played by Jing again. Unexpectedly, Jing explained seriously, "I think this reason is sufficient. First of all, I'm still young, and my understanding of relationships is limited. It's easy for me to fall for it with just his face, but that's not true love. Secondly, I only like positive and upright students. Someone like him with a criminal record is not worthy of me with my clean image. In short, I've only liked his persona for so long. Now that his persona has collapsed, I don't like him anymore. Is that clear enough?" Shinchilyu was stunned. Shinchilyu was dumbfounded. Shinchilyu began to doubt life. Damn, she only liked his persona. There was such a thing as love in this world. Chapter 29. Before Shinchilyu could pull herself out of this confused speech, there was a sudden silence around her. She saw Jing's expression suddenly turn ugly. Then, a series of shouts sounded in front of her. "Brother Shi! Hello, Brother Shi!" Een High School's biggest accident scene of the year was set. It was too tragic. She saw a tall and slender young man with a school bag in one hand and a hand in the pocket of his school uniform. His beautiful eyes sparkled like shining stars, and there was a hint of laziness on his body. He wore the uniform and exuded an air of elegance. His limited edition sneakers were spotless. He stood casually, and his casual posture revealed elegance. He was no longer as arrogant and ruthless as yesterday. Today, he looked like a prince who had walked out of a comic book. It was no wonder that the girls in Een High School were charmed to death. Even He Jing was a little stunned for a moment. But it was only for a moment. He Jing didn't forget the awkward situation she was in. She exchanged a glance with Yan Hanshi and immediately looked away. She was calm and composed as if she wasn't the one who had said those words. Shen Qiuyu called out in surprise, "Brother Shi." In the blink of an eye, she smiled like a flower and happily went up to him like a bird. Morning. Yan Hanshi's gaze was fixed on He Jing. He greeted someone lazily, but no one knew who he was talking to. Shen Qiuyu was overjoyed. She immediately threw He Jing out of her mind and revealed the sweetest smile. "Brother Shi, class is about to start. Let's go to the classroom together." Yan Hanshi was still looking at He Jing. His thin lips curled up, and his eyes were full of meaning. Sure. It was only then that Shen Qiuyu remembered to show off to her love rival. She raised her chin and snorted in He Jing's direction. Then, she went to hold Yan Hanshi's arm, but Yan Hanshi dodged her. Shen Qiuyu felt a little regretful that she couldn't hold Yan Hanshi's arm, but she wasn't discouraged. This was because today could be said to be the gentlest day Yan Hanshi had ever treated her. Usually, Yan Hanshi wouldn't talk to anyone, and all the girls in Een High School were not allowed to get close to him. She was already an exception. He Jing crossed her arms and stood where she was. She was cold and indifferent. She did not know whether to sympathize with her or pity her. In the flow of the novel, the male and female leads were destined to be together. Yan Hanshi was meant to be with Cheng Yi. The other girls were just nothing to him. His momentary tenderness was merely for the sake of plot progression. She would probably be slapped in the face by Cheng Yi later. Only then could she show the unique status of the female lead. Heh. Just as the thought flashed through her mind, Yan Hanshi suddenly stopped not far ahead. He turned around and said with a charming smile, "Three good student, why aren't you following me? Are you waiting there for the punishment of being late?" She knew that he had heard everything she said just now. He Jing had no choice but to follow. She followed behind the two of them at a moderate distance, maintaining a safe distance. Yan Hanshi didn't look back at her, but inexplicably He Jing felt as if she was being stared at. Her whole body was not at ease, her nerves involuntarily tensing up. She was on guard, secretly calculating. If Yan Hanshi recognized her as the one who called the police to arrest him and wanted to find her for revenge, she would deny it. After all, those who went against the male lead usually met a tragic end, and the He family definitely couldn't afford to offend him. Chapter 30. When the three of them entered the classroom together, the entire class was stunned. Yan Hanshi hated it when girls approached him. Today, he seemed to have changed. There were two beautiful girls on his left and right. It was too enviable. The moment struggling student A saw He Jing, he stood up from his seat and waved enthusiastically, "Sister Jing." He Jing looked at him and smiled faintly. The heart of struggling student A melted in half. However, before he could feel too happy, he suddenly sensed a murderous aura. He looked at Yan Hanshi instinctively and saw a casual smile on Yan Hanshi's face as if he hadn't noticed them at all. His mind was stuck. At the same time, Shen Qiuyu deliberately slowed down and stood behind Yan Hanshi. She blocked He Jing at the door and glared at her fiercely. "I was wondering why you gave up on Brother Shi so easily. It turns out that you're playing hard to get. Just wait and see. Brother Shi will definitely be mine." Being misunderstood again, He Jing couldn't be bothered to waste her breath on her. She directly threw her bag, scaring Shen Qiuyu so much that she jumped away reflexively. Then, she walked past her and said, "Up to you." Shen Qiuyu was so angry that her nose almost went crooked. She gritted her teeth. He Jing returned to her seat, took out her English textbook, and stuffed her bag into the drawer. She opened the notebook and began to write down the words she had memorized yesterday. From the corner of her eye, she saw Cheng-yi stand up from her seat. Oh right, the plot had changed last time. Today should be the epic meeting between the male and female leads. The cliché scene of love at first sight and the story of the campus Cinderella was about to begin. Sure enough, Cheng-yi walked past her with a straight face, leaving behind the thick fragrance of Bulgari perfume. She seemed to have dressed up carefully today. Not only did she wear perfume, but even her smooth black hair was slightly curled. She had a crystal maple brooch on her left chest, making her look more noble. Unfortunately, such a mature aura did not suit her. It was like a child stealing adult clothes. It looked a little awkward. Jing could not help but think that the real heiress in the original novel had never made such a mistake. She always presented herself as pure and well-mannered and knew her limits. Now, she was. Without much thought, Cheng-yi stopped in front of Yan Hanqi's desk. She held a book with both hands and looked nervous. Yan Hanqi put his hands in his pockets and stepped on the edge of the desk with one foot. He narrowed his eyes and raised his exquisite chin. Looking at the girl in front of him, he asked coldly, "What's the matter?" Cheng-yi blushed and lowered her head. Her eyelashes drooped slightly as she stammered, "That. I'm a new transfer student, My name is Cheng-yi." Yan Hanqi was impatient and was about to chase her away when he suddenly laughed again. "You're the daughter that the Qing family recently found, the girl who swapped identities with Qing Jing." Cheng-yi was instantly overjoyed that her fingertips trembled. She asked shyly, "You've heard of me?" Yan Hanqi didn't answer. Instead, he lazily showed a rare trace of patience. "Why are you looking for me?" Cheng-yi hesitated for a moment before finally mustering up the courage and handed the book over. She said as if she was unafraid of death, "I heard that you are very good at math. I want to ask you to teach me how to do the questions." As soon as she finished speaking, the entire classroom suddenly fell silent. All the students stared at Cheng-yi with pity in their eyes. They thought, another girl who was bewitched by Brother Shi's appearance. It was widely known, Yan Hanqi had never been kind to women. He would only reject all kinds of advances from girls with a threefold refusal. Not interested. I'm not free. Stay away from me. As time passed, almost no one dared to approach him, spoil his mood, and make him hate them. Chapter 31. Oh, he also had the nickname, Great Demon King. That was how he got it. Jing couldn't help but laugh. Although they were the male lead and the female lead, could this scene be a bit more refreshing? Dressed up like this and speaking such lousy lines, if Yan Hanqi can fall in love with Cheng-yi at first sight, Jing seriously doubted whether Yan Hanqi needed to see an ophthalmologist. But then Yan Hanqi asked, "Why don't you look for Cheng Jing? Her grades are also very good." She thought, bastard. He didn't forget to bring her along even when he was having a romantic scene with the female lead. Cheng-yi clenched the corner of her skirt. Because the atmosphere was tense just now, and she immediately realized that she had said the wrong thing. However, she was not willing to accept failure like this. She had to attract Yan Hanqi's attention and completely outshine Jing. I've already tried. Cheng-yi's tone was downcast. She lowered her eyes slightly and looked aggrieved and pitiful. Jing was unwilling. She said that we were not on the same side. I think. Maybe I'm too stupid and can't learn anything well, so she finds me annoying. Unlike Jing, she's smart and even has extra tutoring from famous teachers, so she had always been outstanding. After she finished speaking, her shoulders trembled and she choked slightly. She pretended to be strong and made people's hearts ache. Immediately, the boys were furious, and a strong desire to protect them surged out of their hearts. They looked at Jing and remembered that she used to look at people with her chin. She was arrogant and insufferably arrogant, but now she had become more and more vicious. They had looked at her in a new light because she sold her notes. They thought that she had changed. As expected, a dog could not change its ways. This was too much. And the instigator of all this stood leisurely on the side, watching all of this with a cold gaze. There was not a hint of shame on her face, as if everything had nothing to do with her. They couldn't help but defend Cheng-yi and said, "Some people bully new students because of their good grades. It's fine if they don't want to teach them, but they're so eccentric. Have they forgotten that they're no longer the heiress of a rich family? That's right. Cheng-yi, don't be discouraged. Your grades are not as good as someone else's because you couldn't afford private tutoring. Otherwise, who's to say who's better than who? Great Demon King, you should act like a decent person for once and help a transfer student. It wouldn't hurt to teach her a math problem. Amidst the chatter, Cheng-yi waited for them to finish speaking. She spoke again, thank you all for your encouragement. I'm fine. It was true. I don't think He Jing did it on purpose. Please don't have any opinions about her because of me. She will be sad too. Listen. In the original novel, a certain cannon fodder who had been secretly in love with Cheng-yi since the first day she transferred here said unhappily, Cheng-yi is so kind. She's a real heiress and is so approachable. Someone should really learn from her. He Jing was listening, so she was so angry that she almost laughed. Sure enough, the female lead of a light-hearted novel was indeed the female lead of a light-hearted novel. If she didn't find someone to slap her face, how could she highlight her uniqueness? How could she attract the male lead to advance the plot? It was time for her, the tragic supporting actress, to sacrifice herself for the plot again. However, she had already read the entire novel. Why didn't she realize that the real heiress was a B*TCH? There was no one else who could have such a max attribute of B*TCH. However, what no one had expected was that a sharp sound suddenly came from the classroom when a desk leg scraped against the floor. This sound seemed to be able to pierce people's eardrums and was extremely unpleasant. It immediately attracted everyone's attention and successfully interrupted the boys' indignation. Chapter 32. All the students looked at the source of the sound and saw that the long leg that was previously resting on the edge of the desk had straightened. The row of desks had all been pushed forward because of his strong movement. The owner of the long leg had a cold expression on his face, and the smile on his face had disappeared. His gloomy face made the boys who had been gossiping feel their hearts thump. They knew that the great Demon King was angry, and not just a little angry but very angry. Cheng-yi immediately felt a surge of delight. She didn't expect her pitiful act to be so effective. Even Yan Hanshi was moved by her. His anger must be because of her. She heard that He Jing liked him. If he stood up for her, He Jing would definitely run out of the classroom in tears. If Yan Hanshi fell in love with her because of this. Thinking of this, Cheng-yi secretly blushed. She had 6 brothers. And none of them were more handsome than him. If such a handsome and capable boy fell for her. So, she took a step forward so that Yan Hanshi could see her face more clearly. She smiled brightly and said, Yan Hanshi, please don't be angry. He Jing might have her own difficulties. She definitely doesn't mean to target me. Then. Get lost. Yan Hanshi coldly spit out these words. Instantly, the classroom fell silent. Although Yan Hanshi was usually cold and aloof, and he didn't give girls any face at all, this was the first time he was so rude. This also. Cheng-yi trembled in fear and took a step back, her pretty face turned pale. She never thought that Yan Hanshi would be so fierce to her. Even if he didn't want to stand up for her, he didn't have to do this to her. She timidly looked into Yan Hanshi's eyes, as if she had fallen into a cold pool. She tried her best to squeeze out a smile, which was ugly and forced as she said, if Yan Hanshi is unwilling, then forget it. I have no intention of causing you trouble. Yan Hanshi smiled, his smile piercing. Since you didn't mean to trouble me, you shouldn't have come to me. The scent of your perfume is awful. I'm about to throw up. Puff. He Jing, who thought that she would sacrifice herself to the heavens for love, almost burst out laughing when she heard this. Cheng-yi was now on the verge of tears. She raised her arm and smelled the refreshing citrus fragrance, and her mind was filled with the words, how could that be? She had asked someone to do some research. Yan Hanshi liked this brand of perfume very much and had even bought different series for his mother. She had painstakingly chosen this one to make herself appear youthful and lively. How could he say it smelled bad? Seeing her reddened eyes, the cannon fodder who admired her resisted Yan Hanshi's invisible pressure and said fearlessly, Brother Shi, aren't you going too far? Cheng-yi didn't do anything and she's still a girl. Yan Hanshi's phoenix eyes turned, and his deadly gaze fell on him. Then I hope that when you get good results in the future, people will think that you were born to be smart and that you were tutored by a famous teacher. It has nothing to do with your hard work." The cannon fodder choked and his face turned red. Instantly, everyone looked at Cheng Yi differently. Not everyone was as brainless as the students who were overprotective. They felt that something was wrong with Cheng Yi's words, but they couldn't put their finger on it. After Yan Hanshi said that, they immediately understood. No wonder Yan Hanshi told her to get lost. She wanted someone else to teach her the questions, but she looked down on He Jing in her heart. When He Jing didn't agree, she started to criticize her with insinuations. Her character was seriously flawed. Chapter 33. This time, Cheng Yi couldn't cry anymore. She was being stared at by the whole class and clearly felt disgusted by them. Even the male classmate who had stood up for her earlier showed a regretful expression as if he had been deceived. She looked at Yan Hanshi helplessly with red eyes. Yan Hanshi pulled his long legs back from the desk expressionlessly, stood up, and walked out. Shen Qiuyu, who had long disliked her, rushed up to her and glared at her fiercely as she said, "Brother, she rarely comes to class, but you messed it up. Are you satisfied now?" Cheng Yi couldn't answer, and then Shen Qiuyu chased after Yan Hanshi. The second bell rang, and the atmosphere in the classroom was a mess. Cheng Yi lowered her head and dared not to see anyone. She hugged her book and slowly returned to her seat. When she passed by He Jing, she stopped and the two of them looked at each other. He Jing curled her red lips and gloated openly. What does it mean to shoot oneself in the foot? With a stone. This is it. Although she knew that they would definitely be together in the end, she was truly enjoying this moment. Cheng Yi bit her lip and glared at her with hatred before continuing to walk forward. After a while, the teacher entered the classroom. Today's first class was physics. The teacher was bald, but he was humorous and well liked by the students. To everyone's surprise, Yan Hanshi actually returned, followed by Shen Qiuyu, trailing lazily behind him. Shen Qiuyu stood behind him and said on his behalf, "Report." The physics teacher glanced at them and said in a good temper, "Go back to your seats. Come earlier next time." Yan Hanshi glanced at He Jing and returned to his seat with a slight smile. Shen Qiuyu's expression seemed a bit frustrated, as if she regretted not having the adventurous experience of skipping class with Yan Hanshi. When she chased after him earlier, she thought that Yan Hanshi had been disgusted by Cheng Yi and left the school. Unexpectedly, she followed him all the way to the restroom. When Yan Hanshi came out of the restroom, he saw her shaking the water off her hands and said expressionlessly, "I didn't expect you to have such a hobby." This made her feel both ashamed and infuriated. The class began. The physics teacher handed back the papers from last week's test and announced the grades. He Jing scored 96 points and took first place, while Yan Hanshi missed the exam and came in last with 0 points. The physics teacher praised He Jing, and the whole class fell silent. All the students suddenly realized the truth. No matter how hard He Jing worked, her IQ was F*King outstanding. They were all humans, so why was the difference so big? The male students blushed with embarrassment. To be honest, hardly anyone at Yin High School came from a poor background. They were all from wealthy families and had numerous tutors. How many students could be as exceptional as He Jing? Cheng Yi clenched her fists when she felt the mocking gazes from all directions. She was unwilling and embarrassed. She did not participate in this examination. What exactly did they want from her? Suddenly, the physics teacher called out, "Cheng Yi." He Jing raised her eyes slightly and glanced at Cheng Yi. Seeing that she stood up hesitantly with a timid look on her face, the physics teacher asked casually in a caring tone, "Cheng Yi, how did you do your physics at your previous school?" Cheng Yi's expression immediately turned extremely ugly. She looked around in a panic and bit her lip hard, and met the teasing or disdainful gazes of the entire class. When she met He Jing's indifferent eyes, she mustered up some courage and smiled slightly as she said, "Teacher, I've always ranked first in physics in my previous school." Chapter 34. Whoa! The entire class gasped in shock. Just a moment ago, she had asked someone to teach her how to do the questions, and now, she claimed to be the top student in her previous school. Is it true? With such poor math skills and outstanding physics, is she really so specialized in a certain subject? It can be specialized in this way. He Jing immediately smiled. The top student in physics. She remembered that in the original novel, she had only gotten 19 marks in her most recent physics exam. Even if she put a piece of dried fish on the paper, even the cat would score more than her. Yet, she dared to say she was the top student in physics in her previous school. Impressive, indeed. As expected of the female lead, she was bold and confident. Suddenly, a hoarse and pleasant voice of a young man sounded from the back of the classroom. Then can you tell me what the highest and lowest points are when the train turns a corner? Cheng-Yi froze. The young man who spoke slowly stood up from behind her. Cheng-Yi, the top student in physics, can't answer such a simple question. He Jing could answer this question correctly in oral form. She thought. What did it have to do with her? He Jing was really confused. If it was an accident that the two of them did not fall in love at first sight according to the original novel, then what was this situation? Why did she feel that Yan Hanqi and Cheng-Yi were completely at loggerheads? Could it be that the two of them had changed the script from falling in love over time to becoming enemies? This was too unpredictable. He Jing could clearly feel that Cheng-Yi was panicking. She could only try her best to remedy the situation. I haven't encountered this question before, and the teaching materials in my previous school were different from those in Yin High School. I haven't learned a lot of knowledge. Yan Hanqi chuckled lightly with a hint of mysterious meaning. Cheng-Yi struggled not to show her cowardice and said stubbornly, but I believe I'll catch up very quickly. Yan Hanqi, you will know when the next physics test comes. Yan Hanqi raised his eyebrows and reluctantly believed her nonsense. He sat down. The physics teacher spoke up at the right time. Cheng-Yi's determination is very good. You must work harder in the future and contribute to the country in the field of physics. Cheng-Yi nodded. Thank you for your encouragement, teacher. In an instant, the way the class looked at her changed. If she was really a physics expert, then what she had said to He Jing earlier might not have been too excessive. Perhaps He Jing had really relied on private tutoring to surpass her. Cheng-Yi felt somewhat relieved in her heart. Now that the words were out, no matter what, she had to outperform He Jing in the next physics test and gain a firm foothold in Yin High School. He Jing noticed the subtle gazes of her classmates when they looked at her and found it funny. The truth would reveal itself eventually, just as Cheng-Yi had said, in the next test. If she could surpass her in a short period of time, it was also her ability. It had nothing to do with her. Could it be that if Cheng-Yi got first place, she would become the last? It was impossible. Calmly, they moved on to the second class. It was their class teacher's class. The class teacher was their language teacher. Before class, she specially announced something. After this monthly exam, we will rearrange the seats. In order to prevent some students from secretly playing with their phones in class from affecting others, the rules of seating this time will be based on the total score. The first and second place will sit together, the third and fourth place will sit together, and so on. I hope everyone will work hard. As soon as she finished speaking, the class erupted. In an instant, He Jing's expression changed, and she could no longer remain calm. Didn't this mean she would be sitting with Yan Hanqi? Chapter 35. The class teacher also specially reminded, Yan Hanqi, I hope you won't be absent for the upcoming monthly exam. A pleasant and smiling voice came from behind, sure. He Jing suddenly felt a burning sensation on her back, as if there was a strong gaze that wanted to penetrate her. Forcefully making her cannon fodder, the author was really good at writing scripts. After school, Shen Qiuyu rushed over almost like flying and declared war on He Jing. Just you wait, I will definitely rank second in the whole class and sit next to Brother Shi. He Jing thought to herself, please, put more effort into it. I don't want to be the first or second place. She had to stay far away from Yan Han as possible. Meanwhile, she heard someone approach Cheng-Yi and flatteringly said, Cheng-Yi, you're really a physics expert. Then, if we end up sitting together after the monthly exam, can you lend me your copy? Cheng-Yi tried her best to maintain a smile and asked in an almost innocent tone, does the monthly exam include physics? Of course. The monthly test covers all subjects, and the entire grade is tested at the same time. Everyone's seat is randomly arranged, and we might be assigned to other classes. Cheng-Yi's expression visibly cracked, and her mind was a little dazed. This slap in the face came too quickly. She had originally wanted to go back and ask the Qing family to find the best teacher to tutor her. As long as she worked hard, she would definitely be able to improve rapidly. At that time, the fake number 1 could also become the real number 1. She did not expect it to appear so soon. However, she still forced a smile and pretended to be generous. If we can be together, I will help you. The student who asked for help was overjoyed and told the good news to others. Jing withdrew her gaze from her and looked at Chen Qiuyu again. You found the wrong opponent. She's your strongest rival. Even if it was picking the best among the worst, the title of first place in the school still carried a lot of weight. Chen Qiuyu turned around and was immediately distracted. I almost forgot about her. She tried to pester Brother Shi on the second day of school. I must confront her. As she spoke, she walked towards Cheng Yi. Jing finally had some peace and quiet. Only then did she pack her bag in an orderly manner. After checking her stationery, she put it in. However, suddenly, a ruler was pressed down on the table. The fingers on the ruler were long and slender. Jing's gaze followed the fingers and moved up to a handsome face. Yan Hanqi was smiling at her and said unhurriedly, 3 good student, can I send you home? Jing responded coldly, no. Since he had heard her say she only liked his character, there was no need to pretend to be polite now. She might as well not like him and make him unable to stand the cold shoulder. Yan Hanqi unexpectedly said, you won't intentionally underperform on this exam, right? Very good, he got it right with one sentence. Jing's thoughts had been poked and she could not answer him, so she chose to avoid him and said extremely coldly, it seems like my performance in the exam has nothing to do with you. Yan Hanqi's thin lips curled up slightly, indeed. But you know that our Yin High School has always valued strength. The results of every monthly examination will be included in the assessment of various rewards, such as the Merit Scholarship and other financial aid programs that have been in vain for many years. Jing's face darkened. Yan Hanqi blinked innocently and said cunningly, good luck, Jing. I have high hopes for you. Jing's eyes turned sharp and glared at him with a murderous look. She thought, all right then, don't regret it. Chapter 36. In the blink of an eye, it was Monday, and the monthly exam was imminent. Jing was assigned to take the exam in her own class, and Yan Hanqi was also in the same class. Moreover, to her annoyance, either by coincidence or divine intervention, Yan Hanqi's seat was right next to hers, and Chen Qiuyu was behind her. With a wolf on the right and a tiger at the back, Jing felt mentally exhausted, but struggling student A ran to her from the back of the classroom excitedly. Sister Jing, we're in the same class for the exam. As long as I can get 19th place this time, I can sit next to you in the future. Jing was dumbfounded. Struggling student A explained, I've asked the teacher. The seating arrangement is vertical, not horizontal. There are 9 seats in a row, which means there are 18 people. If I get 19th place, I'll just sit next to you. Jing asked, did the teacher tell you if the first place would sit by the wall or the aisle? Struggling student A chuckled and said, by the wall. Then he scratched his head again. However, isn't Brother Shi also taking the exam? If Brother Shi takes the exam, Sister Jing can only get 2nd place. She thought, thank you very much. When Chen Qiuyu heard this, she sneered as she entered the classroom, She wants to get 2nd place too. Struggling student A didn't dare to argue with her for fear of being beaten up. He heard Chen Qiuyu say, Jing, do you dare to compete with me? If you can get 2nd place in this monthly exam, I, Chen Qiuyu, will write my name upside down. Jing's red lips curled up and she said in amusement, but I want to get 1st place. Chen Qiuyu burst into laughter, you think you can surpass Brother Shi? Dream on. Usually, Jing's grades were good, ranking around 3rd or 4th. But she couldn't consistently secure 2nd place. Jing didn't want to argue with her at first. It was normal for girls at this age to be blinded by love and fall for their sweetheart. However, she felt that it was necessary to teach her a lesson. That was, women should never say no. Then what if I get 1st place? I won't snatch Yan Hanqi from you again. All right then. Although she was not interested in pursuing Yan Hanqi, she accepted the challenge. Jing nodded readily, remember what you said. Chen Qiuyu huffed, turned around, and returned to her seat. She was going to revise before the exam and vowed to teach Jing a lesson. When the bell rang, Yan Hanqi arrived late. The long-legged young man walked into the classroom leisurely. He wore an ordinary school uniform that made him look like a high-end designer. When he passed by He Jing, he smiled at her and sat down. Soon, the invigilator walked into the examination hall. After the exam, He Jing felt a bit exhausted. After all, it had been a long time since she had taken such a long written exam. After taking so many exams in a row, she still felt a little tired and her fingertips hurt a little. Struggling student A hurriedly ran over to check the questions with her. Sister Jing, what did you choose for the third multiple choice question in math? A. What about the seventh one? D. Struggling student A was relieved and jumped up in joy. Right, everything is right. Sister Jing, it's all thanks to the notebook you sold me. I'm confident this time. I'm sure I can move up by 2 places. He Jing smiled, is that so? Congratulations then. Struggling student A said, Sister Jing, remember to sell me your notes if you have them. The questions in your notes are really amazing. A few of them were exactly what came up in the exam. He Jing couldn't help but ask, by the way, what's your name? Struggling student A, who was chattering non-stop, immediately revealed an expression as if he had been struck by lightning. His mouth was wide open, and it took him a long time to come back to his senses. Ah. My name is Wu Yu. After he reacted, he protested unhappily, Sister Jing, you're so mean. We're in the same class, but you don't even know my name. He Jing said apologetically, I'm sorry. From the corner of her eye, she inadvertently saw Cheng Yi coming out of the classroom next door. She looked like she had lost her soul. It was only when she looked up and saw He Jing that she regained her spirits. She pretended to be calm and walked up to He Jing. She smiled and said, I might have done well in physics this time. Chapter 37. He Jing asked nonchalantly, you cheated? Cheng Yi was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, and instantly got angry. She glared at her fiercely and said, you're the one who cheated. Then, she walked past her into the classroom. This reaction, there was no doubt that she was guilty. He Jing did not believe that Cheng Yi could be enlightened in one day. Because in the original novel, after being tutored by Yan Hanqi and a famous teacher for half a year. Since she was so confident that she could do well in physics, the only possibility was that she cheated. She couldn't fathom what method Cheng Yi had used to cheat, which managed to deceive both the teachers and the advanced invigilation technology of Yin High School. 3 days later, the monthly examination papers were marked and the scores of each subject were announced by the respective teachers. In the first class, the English teacher walked in with the test papers and said happily, our class has made great progress in this exam, especially He Jing. He Jing scored 150 points in English, and Yan Hanqi scored 149 points in second place. There's a difference of 10 points between him and our third-ranked student, Shen Qiuyu, who got 139 points. Let's congratulate these 3 students. As soon as the teacher finished speaking, the entire class was in an uproar. Oh my God, she actually got full marks for English. What kind of monster was this? Everyone looked at He Jing in disbelief. If Yan Hanqi's long-standing first place in grades was called an unbeatable miracle, then this miracle had already been broken, even if it was just this one subject. A hint of interest appeared in the eyes of the person whose miracle had been broken. He wasn't unhappy at all. Instead, he smiled happily. He Jing was very calm. She took a look at her paper and found that 0.5 marks had been deducted from her essay. Her actual score should be 149.5, which was rounded up to full marks. It was only 0.5 marks higher than Yan Hanqi's actual score of 149. It could be said that it was very close. Next, Wu Yu has 120 points, Cheng Yi, 45 points. As Cheng Yi went to the stage to collect her paper, she looked pale and almost about to collapse. She felt a sharp pain in her heat, nails digging deep into her palm as she endured the scornful gazes around her. In the second class, the chemistry teacher came in with the test papers. He had the same expression as the English teacher from the previous class. The students couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Then, they heard a familiar tone and a familiar line, our classmate He Jing has made great progress. Last time, she fell behind in chemistry, but this time, she got first place. Well done. Come, let's start handing out the papers. He Jing, 96 points, Yan Hanqi, 96 points. Shen Qiuyu, 94 points, Cheng Yi, 9 points. The students were speechless. First place again. Although they were tied for first place, still. Hello, what's the matter? Do you have any consideration for other examinees? The impact of this perfect score was too strong, no one even noticed Cheng Yi, who only scored a single digit. When it was the third class, the biology teacher walked in with the test paper. This time, He Jing was finally not in first place, but she secured second place with a 1-point difference. Shen Qiuyu was 3 points lower than her. They were already numb to the language and math classes that followed. Either He Jing or Yan Hanqi came in first. The two study gods were competing with each other and left a significant gap with the rest of the students, who could only look up to them. In the final physics class in the afternoon, Cheng Yi, with a gloomy face, finally cheered up, and her beautiful eyes lit up slightly. Here it comes. Before the physics teacher could speak, a student teased, "Teacher, you don't need to build suspense. Just tell us directly. Is the first place He Jing or Yan Hanqi? Let us know who the final first place is." The physics teacher shook his head and smiled, "Neither. The first place in physics this time is the new transfer student, Cheng Yi. Congratulations, Cheng Yi, for achieving a perfect score of 100 points for first place in physics in the school. You really didn't disappoint the teacher." Chapter 38. The whole class was dead silent. All the students were astonished. No way, Cheng Yi actually got first place. She had only scored 40 points in English and a single digit in chemistry. Yet, she stood out in physics and surpassed He Jing and Yan Hanqi. Cheng Yi stood up slowly and smiled politely. "Thank you, teacher. I will continue to work hard." Whispers immediately rang out below, could she have cheated? It's not common for someone to excel in one subject while struggling in others. Focusing on physics alone and obtaining first place seemed like an attempt to cover up some deception. At this moment, Shen Qiuyu stood up and said loudly, "Teacher, I want to report He Jing. She must have cheated." Huh. The students who were questioning Cheng Yi turned their attention to He Jing. The physics teacher was a gentle and honest person. He hated cheating, so his face darkened and he asked, "What happened?" Shen Qiuyu said angrily, "No matter how good He Jing's grades were before, she was only in third place. However, in such a short period of time, she seemed to have taken a smart pill overnight. She was either first or second. If I'm not wrong, He Jing also scored high in physics, right?" The physics teacher frowned and said, "Yes." He reported He Jing's score, 98 points, in second place with Yan Hanqi. Shen Qiuyu immediately turned to look at He Jing and asked angrily, "He Jing, tell the truth. What despicable methods did you use to deceive the invigilators and the surveillance cameras in the examination hall?" He Jing was so angry that she laughed. She was sitting at home, and the blame fell from the sky. Was this her fate of having to bear the burden of the female lead? She slowly stood up from her seat and said indifferently, "I didn't cheat." Shen Qiuyu didn't believe her. She strode up to her and rummaged through her desk and drawers, attempting to find a cheat sheet. When she didn't find anything, she moved on to rummage through her school bag. A large pile of stationery poured out of her school bag and smashed onto the table. Some even fell to the ground. He Jing grabbed her wrist and said coldly, "If you're willing to bet, you have to admit defeat. Enough is enough. If she didn't cheat, she didn't cheat." No matter how much they searched, they wouldn't find any evidence. Shen Qiuyu seemed to have found something to use against her, and she shook her hand away. "You're feeling guilty. Is it hidden in your phone?" Even the students who were watching the show felt that she had gone a little overboard. Struggling student A, Wu Yu, could not help but say, "You have to hand in your phone during the monthly exam." He Jing can't bring her phone in. Shen Qiuyu answered without thinking, "That means she has another phone. Anyway, she definitely can't become so smart all of a sudden. It's fine if she passed me, but she also passed brother Shi." He Jing laughed genuinely. She said in a mocking and pitying tone, "Shen Qiuyu, if you can't do it yourself, others can't do it either. I don't blame you for having such thoughts, but you treat Yan Hanqi as a god and think he's the smartest in the world. Have you asked your parents if they admit that their genes are inferior to Yan Hanqi's parents' genes? Think about it again, why can't there be someone in this world who can surpass Yan Hanqi in academics? Rankings are meant to be surpassed. No matter how difficult a test paper is, there's always a maximum score. No matter how good Yan Hanshi is, he's just a person. He has to put in a lot of effort to maintain his first place. If you really think that Yan Hanshi is a genius who can get a first place even if he skips class every day, fights, and doesn't study, then it's not surprising that you don't have the courage to get first place. Chapter 39. However, I'm different from you. I have no rivals and no limits. It doesn't matter to me even if I surpass Yan Hanshi. As long as I don't get full marks in every subject and make mistakes in every exam, I'll never be satisfied. I want to achieve better results. The genius in your eyes is not something that I can't surpass. This exam is based on my own strength. Not only this time but next time, I will also work hard to achieve my own goal. If you have any objections to me or believe that my grades are fake, please go and find evidence after class. This is the teacher's classroom now, not the place for you to act unruly. He Jing turned to look at the physics teacher and said respectfully, "Teacher, please continue." The physics teacher was no longer angry. His eyes were filled with admiration and praise. "Not bad, He Jing. You have a good learning attitude. You must continue to maintain it. I believe that you didn't cheat." Shen Qiuyu was completely speechless. It was as if her worldview had been shattered for over a decade. She was in a daze. After a long while, she said, "I'm sorry," and ran out of the classroom. The student stared at He Jing and felt that her entire body was glowing. Someone in the back row of the classroom twirled a pen with a bright smile in his eyes, mixed with the excitement of a hunter. The commotion had been repeated one after another, but it had returned to calm so quickly. The classroom had returned to order. No one remembered that Cheng Yi had ranked first in the class. She stood there in a daze, motionless. The bright smile on her beautiful face had long disappeared. It was only when the physics teacher reminded her, "Cheng Yi, come over and collect your test papers. Let's talk about the test papers next." Cheng Yi pinched herself hard and used the pain to maintain her composure. She walked up to the stage and held the 100-mark paper that she had obtained through cheating. She felt that it was extremely dazzling. When He Jing was first in the subject, she could get the attention of everyone. Everyone let out "wow" sounds, filled with envy and admiration. When it came to her, all that was left was doubt and forgetting. She thought, why was it so unfair? She was clearly the heiress of the Qing family. He Jing had stolen more than 10 years of her life. Yet she still faced constant setbacks while He Jing effortlessly gained everyone's attention. No, she couldn't accept it. Cheng Yi held the paper and unconsciously crumpled it. Suddenly, she thought of something and smiled again. After school, He Jing packed her bag and headed to First High School to wait for He Ning and He Sui. Wu Yu's face was filled with tears. "Sister Jing, you're too amazing. How did you manage to get the seat near the wall? It wasn't easy for me to get to 19th place. But now he had to be next to Yan Hanshi, the great demon king. It felt so uncomfortable." He Jing laughed, "You underestimated me. You should work hard to get 3rd place so that you can sit behind me." "I don't even dare to think about it." Halfway through his sentence, Wu Yu quickly changed his words. "All right, Sister Jing. I'll work hard next time. I'll definitely try to sit behind you." Just as He Jing had said in class, the bigger your heart is, the bigger the stage will be. A man should never say he can't do it. He Jing packed her bag and left the school. She bought ice cream and snacks as usual and walked through the same alley as usual. However, a man was leaning against the electricity pole at the entrance of the alley. The setting sun shone on his body, casting a slender and tall shadow on the ground. He bent one leg and stepped on the electricity pole in a very relaxed posture. His beautiful eyes looked at her with a dazzling smile, and his voice had a hint of ridicule. "3 good student, why are you so slow?" Chapter 40. He Jing halted and kept a distance from him. She looked at him expressionlessly. "What's the matter?" Yan Hanshi put one hand in his pocket, straightened his body, and asked with a smile, "You really don't want to be sworn brothers with me?" He Jing said coldly, "I think you should have a brain checkup. How could you think of letting a girl become your sworn brother? Do you consider yourself an ordinary girl?" He Jing caught the stick with her bare hands. 1 person taking on 10. An ordinary girl. He Jing said, I am. Yan Hanqi smiled. I can apologize for my ungentlemanly behavior earlier. Please reconsider. He Jing felt that there was no need to consider it. If she was just an ordinary cannon fodder, she would definitely be happy to throw herself at his thigh. Unfortunately, she was not. She was a vicious female supporting character. He Jing couldn't be bothered to argue with him anymore. She didn't say a word and continued to walk forward, trying to pass him and go straight to first high school. However, when she passed the electricity pole, her arm was grabbed. A refreshing and clean smell of sea salt surrounded her. The hot temperature of the young man's palm penetrated the thin summer clothes, and her skin turned hot and red. A handsome face gradually enlarged in front of her. Though she had the ability to push him away, He Jing found herself unable to move. Here it came again. That D***Ned novel logic. Yan Hanqi was about to kiss her. He Jing's forehead started to sweat from nervousness and discomfort. She hated the feeling of being dominated. However, when Yan Hanqi's tall nose was about to touch hers, he suddenly stopped. He glanced at her, his long and narrow black eyes flickering with tiny bright spots of light. His Adam's apple moved slightly as he said, "Hey, do you have to be so difficult to get?" Although his words were vexed, his tone was filled with joy. He Jing's heart was relieved, and she heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she met his eyes and looked him in the eye. It was the first time in her life that a little boy had flirted with her and almost kissed her. He Jing found it funny. She tilted her head and curled her red lips. You finally realized that some people, whom you usually ignore, are now out of your reach. Yan Hanqi raised an eyebrow. Are you blaming me for being too cold to you, my lovely fiancé? He Jing raised her hand and stretched out a finger to tap the center of his forehead, pushing his face away forcefully. She clapped her hands and said, "Do you need me to remind you that your fiancé is the heiress of the Qing family? I'm just an imposter. My surname is He now. Cheng Yi is your little sweetheart." Little sweetheart. Yan Hanqi seemed to have discovered an interesting word. He thought about it carefully and then smiled. I still think you're sweeter. Without any artificial perfume seen, her entire body, or even a strand of hair, had the smell of milky strawberries. If it wasn't for his years of education and self-restraint, he really couldn't help but want to take a bite of her small, cute, and crystal-clear earlobes he saw just now. Fortunately, He Jing did not know what he was thinking at the moment. She only said coldly, "Then you should have heard of a saying, a good horse doesn't graze on old pasture." Yan Hanqi thought for a moment and said casually, "I am a human." Being human meant there would be regrettable choices, and changing one's mind when one was wrong was not a bad thing. He Jing choked and then became angry. Other than wanting to call him a hooligan, she had no other thoughts. Yan Hanqi chuckled when he saw her slightly annoyed expression. He then stepped aside and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have teased you. If you're unwilling, I won't force you. Let's just consider what happened earlier as a way to greet my new deskmate." He Jing couldn't help but glare at him. She thought, what the F***ck kind of greeting was that? Who would greet others like that? Chapter 41. Chapter 41, Overly Protective. Chapter 41, Overly Protective. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor, Nyoibo Studio. Fortunately, Yan Hanqi didn't continue to pester her. After a while, he disappeared from view. He Jing looked away, frowned slightly, and went to first high school. There was early dismissal at first high school that day. When He Jing arrived, He Ning and He Sui happened to come out with a group of male students. He Jing smiled and called out, "Second brother, fourth brother." He Ning and He Sui looked up at the same time and saw the long-legged and slender He Jing not far off. Their expressions froze, and then they heard the surrounding students exclaim, "Wow." He Jing was tall, and the Een High School skirt was short even for the average person. Even with the white stockings, her fair legs were exposed. He Sui took off his school jacket that was tied around his waist, walked forward, and threw it at her. He said fiercely, "Didn't we agree that you'd do some homework at Een High School and wait for us to pick you up?" He Jing blinked. "I finished my homework in 10 minutes between classes, so I came over." A male student from first high school nudged He Ning. He was envious and moved, so excited that he looked as though he had scored full marks. "He Ning, is this your sister? She's so pretty." He Ning pursed his thin lips and ignored him. He Jing walked up to He Ning and lifted her head to look at him. She called out, "Second brother," once more and then looked at the people beside him. She smiled sweetly and waved at them. "Hello, my name is He Jing. I'm He Ning and He Suit's sister." The male students were restless. They secretly rubbed their palms and said softly, "He Jing, can you give me your wee chat?" Before they could finish, He Ning placed his wide palm on He Jing's face and turned her around. He coldly said, "Go." He Jing didn't know what was going on. She sighed and complained, "Second brother, you're covering my eyes." The male students were speechless. These two brothers. They had such a strong desire to protect. He Jing followed He Ning and He Sui onto the bus. She didn't understand why her two brothers were angry. She was protected by the two of them in a small corner. There were no handrails around her, so she could only tug at He Ning's clothes. After thinking for a moment, she chose somewhere else to tug at, asking He Sui, "Fourth brother, don't you have a good relationship with your classmates?" Oh. So this was the crux of the problem. He Jing understood and didn't ask any further. They made their way home in this way. He Xiaoguo was already back and was sprawled at the dining table in the living room doing his homework. When he heard the sound of the door opening, his dark, beady eyes lit up. He jumped down from the high chair that was so high that his toes couldn't reach the ground. When he saw He Jing holding a snack in her hand, he ran over happily and hugged He Jing's thigh. He Jing smiled. She bent down and patted his head before handing him the snacks. He Xiaoguo immediately opened the snacks. He Sui tossed his bag on the sofa and said, "I'm going to take a shower." He Ning was about to go into her room when He Xiaoguo suddenly choked and said, "By the way, Xiao Jing. There were several calls earlier. They were for you." He Jing looked at his bulging hamster-like cheeks as he sucked on his chubby little fingers. Her gaze was gentle as she asked, "Who called?" She didn't say. She only said that she wanted you to return a call when you came back. "I got it," He Jing said. The He family was poor and could not afford a cell phone for everyone, so they had an old-fashioned landline at home. The old-fashioned telephone had not been cleaned for a long time, and the dial was covered in dust. However, the phone body was smooth to the touch, and not even a single scrap of paint had peeled off. He Jing picked it up. She opened the call history and a long string of numbers at the top jumped into view. It was actually the Qing family's phone number. Chapter 42, Condemned. Chapter 42, Condemned. He Jing paused. She heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw He Ning stopping behind her. His eyes were lowered, and his expression was hard to see. However, there was a gloomy aura surrounding him. He Jing immediately understood his thoughts. He missed Cheng Yi. He must have hoped that this call was from Cheng Yi. Unfortunately, it was unlikely. After calming herself down, He Jing dialed the number. Beep beep. The call went through. He Ning reached out and put the phone on speaker. He Jing shouted into the microphone, "Hello." There was a 3-second pause before a high-pitched female voice burst forth like a volcanic eruption. The decibel was so loud that it almost split the roof. "He Jing, how dare you bully Xiao Yi in school? I didn't chase you out of Yin High School because of our many years of mother-daughter relationship. You actually bullied my biological daughter when I was unprepared." He Jing had never thought that old-fashioned phones could have the function of a loudspeaker. She hurriedly covered the microphone to reduce the noise pollution as she listened to the commotion on the other end. "Things haven't been clarified yet. Shooping, don't make things sound too unpleasant. Xiao Yi came back in that state, and you're still speaking up for a fake daughter. Cheng Yu, do you have a heart?" But Xiao Yi also said that it has nothing to do with Jingjing. Let's not misunderstand Jingjing. Other than her, who else dares to bully the daughter of the Qing family? Xiao Yi is kind and afraid that we will be sad, so she pushed the blame on her behalf. How could you believe these words? The receiver fell silent. Then, the middle-aged man raised his voice. "Hello, Jingjing." Only then did He Jing remove her hand from the receiver. She picked up the phone and put it to her ear. She replied, "Uncle Cheng." Her adoptive father, Cheng Yu, said with a hint of heartache, "Jingjing, I've doted on you for so many years and spoiled you until you have a pampered personality. I've never regretted it. I've always felt that you're still able to understand right from wrong despite being spoiled. I feel that you're not a bad person, except for being a little willful usually, but this time, you've disappointed Daddy too much." Xiaoyi wept very sadly when she came back. Even though she was crying so sadly, she kept trying to defend her and said that she must have been targeting her unintentionally. No matter how angry He Jing was at them for switching Cheng Yi back to the Qing family, she should not vent her anger on Cheng Yi. She had suffered enough for so many years. He Jing was so amused that she even laughed out loud. She asked, "What did Cheng Yi tell you?" Yi Shuping grabbed the receiver and said sternly, "Xiao Yi didn't say anything bad about you. Don't even think about making personal attacks on her." "Then why don't we call her over to confront her?" He Jing said. Yi Shuping said coldly, "Xiao Yi is tired from crying. She's already asleep. She didn't do her homework today. No matter what the truth is, I'm warning you not to bully Xiao Yi in school in the future. Otherwise, I'll get in high school to expel you." After saying that, the phone was hung up with a bang, leaving behind a busy tone. He Jing put down the phone and turned around to see He Ning's indifferent gaze. He Sui, who had just gotten some clothes from his room and was about to take a shower, stood at the door with an ugly expression. Even He Xiaogua, who had been eating snacks, stopped eating, pulling the fingers he had been sucking on from his mouth and frowning. Her heart sank, and she slowly got up from her squatting position. "What did you do to Xiao Yi?" He Sui stared at her and asked coldly. The warmth they felt on the way home from school disappeared at this moment. Chapter 43, Indifference. Chapter 43, Indifference. He Jing smiled and crossed her arms over her chest. "What do you think I can do to her?" He Sui clenched his fists in anger and gritted his teeth. "You're not allowed to bully Xiao Yi in school." He Jing clicked her tongue and pulled out a chair beside her. She sat down and said, "She only cried for a while, and the Qing family called to blame me. You guys also see me as an enemy. We were both switched at birth, but why is the difference so big?" It was as if fate had mercilessly grabbed her throat. She couldn't blame Cheng Yi for running home crying for not scoring better than her for the exams. When she cried, everyone coaxed her and sided with her. This feeling was explosive. It was time for her, the vicious supporting actress, to sacrifice herself for pleasure again. He Sui was already furious, and when he heard her nonchalant tone, he became even more enraged. He tossed his clothes aside and rushed forward, accusing her, "You bullied Xiao Yi, and you still dare to make sarcastic remarks." He Jing looked at him with bright eyes. "Why wouldn't I dare to? Isn't that the truth?" He Sui slammed his fist on the table. He looked infuriated and on the verge of strangling her. "You're so vicious. I'll never treat you as my sister." In an instant, He Jing's face went blank. Her beautiful eyes were numb and indifferent, as if she had never had any feelings for him. Suddenly, He Sui felt a little flustered. After a second or two of silence, He Jing smiled again. It was sweet, but not as warm as before. "All right, then I won't treat you as my brother." He Sui's heart stopped and he suddenly regretted what he had said. However, on second thought, He Jing had done something wrong. Why was she so confident? He was right to do this. He Jing had already stood up and walked around him. She returned to her room and closed the door. He Sui's anger was inexplicably extinguished by more than half. He pointed at the door and said, "Second brother, look at her attitude. It was she who bullied Xiao Yi first." He Ning's eyes grew colder as he walked away without saying a word. The next day, the atmosphere was clearly much colder when the three of them went to school together. In the morning, when everyone was together in the living room, He Jing only said good morning to He Xiaogua. As they ate, she didn't say a word either. He Sui's expression was dark, as if someone owed him 8 million. He Ning was still wearing his earphones, his eyes closed, and his entire body was emitting a cold aura that kept people away. When the bus stopped and the three of them got off, He Sui loudly said, "Hey! I'm warning you again. You're not allowed to bully Xiao Yi in school. He Jing turned a deaf ear and stepped into the school. As soon as she entered the classroom, she saw Cheng Yi talking and laughing with her new desk mate. There were also several girls surrounding her. She seemed to have sensed something and looked at her with a meaningful smile. He Jing only took a glance before she withdrew her cold gaze and returned to the first seat in the first row. After a while, a graceful figure appeared in front of her. Cheng Yi stood in front of the desk and said in a condescending and caring tone, "He Jing, are you okay? I'm really sorry about yesterday. Dad and Mom were too concerned about me and wrongly accused you. I've already explained it to them." He Jing did not even lift her eyelids and said in a dull tone, "Are you done? If you're done, I have to revise." Cheng Yi's face stiffened, and then she couldn't hide the joy in her eyes. She pretended to be worried and asked, "My brothers didn't make things difficult for you, right? Especially fourth brother. He has an explosive temper and always speaks harshly, but he doesn't have any bad intentions. Don't take it to heart." He Jing finally looked up at her and clearly stated, "Please correct your words. Those are my brothers, not yours. If there's a conflict, we'll resolve it behind closed doors. It has nothing to do with you." Chapter 44, Not Familiar. Chapter 44, Not Familiar. Cheng Yi was delighted. The more He Jing was like this, the happier she was. If He Jing really wasn't bothered, she wouldn't have said that. She would only be high and mighty as usual, looking like she didn't care at all. After seeing what she wanted to see, Cheng Yi turned around to return to her seat. However, she bumped into a firm and warm embrace. The pleasant smell of sea salt instantly engulfed her. She looked up and into the young man's clear and beautiful eyes. His handsome eyebrows were like the proud works of the heavens, and his soft thin lips looked extremely kissable. Cheng Yi's face turned red and she stammered, "Student. Student Yan." It was Yan Hanshi. However, the young man did not give her a second look. He only took a step back calmly as if she was air. Instead, he smiled at He Jing. "Good morning, merit student." The smile in his eyes was like shimmering waves, more dazzling than the sunlight outside the window. He Jing glanced at him with an unwelcome look when she heard that. She said perfunctorily, "Good morning." But that didn't stop Yan Hanshi from finding her cute. His smile grew wider. He sat down beside her and took out the monthly test paper. "I have a question I don't know how to answer." He Jing, of course, would not believe him. The all-round male protagonist had an IQ of 280. Even if he accidentally answered a question wrongly during the exam, that would be him being absent-minded and handing in the paper carelessly. After the exam, he would be able to get the correct solution with a casual glance. Was it up to her to teach him? Merit student, among the three, morality, intelligence, and aesthetics. Morality is ranked first. I'm wicked. Yan Hanshi could tell at once that his new deskmate was petty and was taking revenge on him for saving I'm human previously. At this moment, a gentle and pure female voice sounded from the side. "Student Yan, are you doing corrections for the physics paper? Perhaps I can teach you." The air seemed to freeze for a moment. Cheng Yi's smile was gentle and confident. Fortunately, in order to set herself up as a physics genius, she had asked her tutor to properly explain this test paper to her the day before. Although she didn't understand many physics terms and a long list of formulas, she had almost memorized everything the tutor had said. It shouldn't be a problem for her to deal with others. Unexpectedly, Yan Hanshi only raised his eyelids slightly and asked lazily, "Why are you still here?" Cheng Yi's face turned pale. Her fingertips curled up as she grabbed the hem of her suit. "Student Yan, I..." Oh, only then did Yan Hanshi remember what she had said earlier. "Thank you for your kindness, Cheng Yi. We're not familiar with each other, so I won't trouble you." Cheng Yi was completely humiliated. Her eyes turned red as she covered her face and ran back to her seat. He Jing was inexplicably pleased. The unhappiness she felt from being disgusted just now had disappeared. She smiled and glanced sideways at Yan Hanshi. "If you do this, you'll be courting your wife in the future. Do you have some misunderstanding about me?" Yan Hanshi laughed. "Is she worthy?" He Jing thought to herself, from the looks of it, it's a no. I just don't know what else the real daughter will do. In short, he will definitely regret it in the future. During the first lesson, the class teacher summarized the previous day's monthly test. When she mentioned once more that Jing had surpassed Yanhanshi to become the top student in the class, the whole class was still a little overwhelmed. Until the class teacher said, "Student Jing is now appointed as the new student counselor of my class. I hope everyone can learn from her." Everyone cried out in surprise and looked at Yanhanshi. He was smiling slightly, but he didn't show any other expression. Part 2 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.